This is a rerun of my episode with psychic medium Mark Anthony. He is doing an event with the Omega Institute that I am so excited about. If you haven't listened to this episode yet, listen and learn a bit more about him. This event is called the NDE Zone. What's the NDE Zone? Okay, so I know you all love learning about afterlife evidence, near-death experiences, and mediumship as much as I do. So I want to share this event I'm attending, the NDE Zone, connected by the light from the cosmic to the subatomic, being taught by Mark Anthony, who's a fourth-generation evidential psychic medium. This event will be hosted by one of my favorite places, the Omega Institute, where transformation becomes real. It's virtual, so it will be affordable and easy to attend. Mark describes the NDE Zone as the interface between our material world dimension and the other side dimension. Also, Mark's an attorney, so he loves evidence, explains these topics in a very relatable and non-woo way. Plus, he's really funny. In this 2-hour event, Mark will take you on an entertaining and educational journey from the cosmic to the subatomic to explain our present understanding of the NDE zone through quantum physics. So, very sciencey. And then we will conclude by looking toward future discoveries yet to be revealed. I'll be there. I go to as many Omega events as I can, so please come, and afterwards you can tell me what you thought about it. It will be January 28th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can sign up on eomega.org, and while you're there, be sure to check out their other incredible transformative events. That's eomega.org.
It's funny, I hear people talk about their spiritually transformative experiences where they're sitting on a mountaintop in Maui and, the birds and the rainbow. No, mine was a fire hose to the face at point blank range. Boom. And, and I'm glad for that. Because there was no mistaking what I was being told, no mistaking what my mission was going to be.
Mark Anthony, J.D., Psychic Explorer, also known as the Psychic Lawyer, is a fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits.
The conclusion of the study is it appears that consciousness survives physical death. So now we're getting empirical data, scientific evidence that when you physically die, your body may die, but your consciousness realm, and what I refer to as the electromagnetic soul, the EMS, survives your physical death.
He's an Oxford-educated attorney, licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court.
So an electron's disappearing, then reappearing in another location without going through the matter in between. And so the theory is that the electron is quantum leaping, going through like a mini version of a black hole to another dimension and then returning to our dimension. And so by analogy, that's what happens when we die. Our soul leaves our body and quantum leaps to what I call the afterlife frequency, to another dimension. And that's
Please welcome Mark Anthony. Hey everyone. I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the Today I am speaking with Mark Anthony, JD, the Psychic Explorer, also known as the Psychic Lawyer. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, Liz, it's great to be here. Thank you.
It's wonderful to speak with you too. I'm so excited. I just finished your book. I so enjoyed your story. And first, I'm really curious. Tell us a little bit first about your career as a lawyer and how you made the switch to Psychic Explorer, Psychic Medium. For some reason, right after I asked this question, we lost about a minute of the conversation. So it's going to sound a little weird, like he's jumping in, and it's going to seem like a little bit is missing, but the core of this answer is caught. And it's really kind of a wonderful story about his parents and how they met and when they met.
Well, let me back up a bit. And so after the Navy, he was at a dance, where a bunch of sailors were, and he spotted my mom. And he thought, it's so funny hearing my dad say, I saw this foxy looking dame. What it was, my mom was all of like 18, but she looked older because she worked in fashion at a high-end retailer. And mom said she got all the latest styles wholesale. So she would dress to the nines, and dad was all of 21, and they noticed a connection. And she was a good girl, so of course she would meet him at a couple more dances. And they noticed this there was a connection. It went beyond just, hey, you're pretty, or you're handsome. And she said to him, before we go any further, you need to know something about me. I see spirits. And my dad, replied as a sailor could and would, with a number of colorful metaphors, followed by, I do too. And so it was really a beautiful love story between the two of them, and how they connected. And they had me later in life. I have an older sister, older brother, and they didn't, plan on having me, but I showed up. And so I start seeing spirits when I'm 3.5 years old. And I remember dad telling me, keep this between don't tell anyone but your mother and me. Don't talk to anyone about this. People don't understand. And so as I got older, I could see why they said that, particularly when I started Catholic school, And at first I thought, Liz, well, they're talking about angels and saints and all these invisible beings. I was like, hey, this is like right up our alley. And then I heard the other things they were saying, so I realized let's keep this quiet. As a teenager and a young man, I was very drawn to the clergy, which is not unusual for mediums, but I felt it was too constricting. And my parents we had this discussion, because even though, we're a Catholic family, my dad had to convert to marry my mother. That's how it was in ye olden days. We were very interfaith. We always respected the beliefs of other religions, and we were not, intolerant. We were open-minded about it. And I felt that it was too filled with rules and regulations. So, Liz, I ended up in the legal system. So talk about, it was kind of like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. And so I was in the legal profession for quite some time. And then eventually I had a very profound experience that took me out of it.
Oof. Are you comfortable sharing what that profound experience was?
Yes. Needless to say, my parents and I were very close. And, I had a reputation in the legal system for being kind of weird. But weird where other lawyers appeared to be a bit frightened of me because I seemed to know things that other people didn't. Especially things would come out in court. We could talk about, stuff like that if you would like. But I was in my law office and I was a senior partner of a firm, and I was thinking about spaghetti. Now, it's not unusual for a boy of Italian descent to be thinking about spaghetti, but then the phone rings and it's my mother. And she said, "Honey, if you're free for lunch, I made spaghetti. Would you like to come over?" And I thought, sure. My parents lived about 5 miles from my office. And I had the time, so I drove over there. And the thing is, Liz, it was really wonderful. Mom and Dad were there, and we were laughing and telling stories. Mom looked really tired that day, though, and I noticed she was a bit unsteady on her feet, but she didn't let that stop her from making a beautiful, beautiful meal. And before I left, she hugged me and kissed me. And she said, "Mark, I love you so much. And I'm so happy you've been my son." And I said, "I love you too, Mom." But when I left, I had this profound sense that just a sense of foreboding. So the next day, I was in court, and the judge's assistant came into the courtroom and said, "Mark, we need you in the judge's chambers right now." And as soon as I walked in and I saw the phone on hold, I knew it was going to be bad. And it was my secretary. She was in tears, and she said, "Your dad called. Your mom died." And what had happened is she passed in her sleep very peacefully. But I nosedived into depression. I mean, who wouldn't, right? I mean, losing a mother is extremely painful. And even though I had these beliefs in the ability to see spirits, I'm a human being. And, my colleagues who are mediums, we talk about that. It's not like grief bounces off of us. We feel it too. We feel the sense of loss. And so about 2 weeks later, I was driving back from court, and all of a sudden I felt the need. I had to pull over because I felt one of those waves of grief about to hit me. And I figured, let me just pull over. I was in the parking lot of a convenience store, way away from everything. And I said, because I don't want to walk into my office like fighting tears. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there in this parking space, Liz, and this flash of light goes off in the car. And I look to the passenger seat, and for a couple seconds, I saw my mother's silhouette in this beautiful silver white light. And her voice filled my head. And she said, "You have the gift of mediumship so that you will not be crushed by grief. But now you must help those who are suffering with theirs." All right, so now I'm trying to process this. And then I hear her next message. It was her voice in my head. And she said, "Your life's mission is to help people understand that God exists, that an afterlife exists, that souls are immortal living beings, that people can communicate with souls, and that we will all be reunited in the light you call God when it is your time to leave this world." And all I could say was, okay. I mean, I was overwhelmed and I was drenched in sweat. And I remember thinking, I can't tell anybody this. They're going to think I'm insane. But then another thought came to replace that said, there's no turning back now. This is your path. So that's what led me to leave the legal career behind and embrace my spiritual path.
Oof, wow, that must have been amazing to get that message from your mom.
It was wonderful to hear from her, and but it was kind of overwhelming. It's funny. I hear people talk about their spiritually transformative experiences where they're sitting on a mountaintop in Maui, and the birds and the rainbow. No, mine was a fire hose to the face at point blank range. Boom, and and I'm glad for that. Because there was no mistaking what I was being told, no mistaking what my mission was going to be. Now, the thing is, there's no manual on how to leave the legal profession and become a full-time psychic medium. And so it's been a fascinating adventure. And I've just met the most amazing people along the way.
So, what was even your next step with that? I assume you didn't just quit that day. How did you even navigate that?
Well, that's a cool story too, because, all right, so here I am. I'm a senior partner of a law firm, which is a lot of responsibility. And I was thinking, I started doing readings but then I said, I've really got to get out of this. And I knew this gentleman who got elected um, to a position in the county. And he contacted me and he said, would you like to work in local government and head of court operations? And I thought, well, that will be great. Okay. Because then that's a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 ish kind of job. And you don't have the intensity of the legal profession. So I left, I sold my law practice and I started working at this government agency. And then my first book, Never Letting Go, came out. And I brought on my manager, Rocky. She's really awesome. And if you're at IANS, you'll get to meet her. She travels with me. And so Rocky worked her magic and she got me an appearance on MSNBC in New York City, followed by a trip to Boston to speak at Harvard. So it was cool when we were at MSNBC because we're in the studio next to where they filmed Saturday Night Live. I mean, it was just really neat being there. And then we're in Boston, and it was a couple weeks before Christmas because I remember it was really cold, and we were drinking hot coffee, and it was steaming, and everything was decorated. And Harvard's beautiful anyway. And all of a sudden, my cell phone rings, and it's the elected official, and he said, we're getting a lot of grief from a political party, and I'll let the listeners figure out which one, criticizing me for having a psychic on staff. And I said, well, you didn't hire me because I'm a psychic. You hired me because of my skills managing people and in the court system. And he goes, and you're taking too much time off. I said, yes, and it's all legitimate vacation time. And he was just complaining and complaining. And I said, well, sir, let me make this very easy for you. And he goes, how so? I go, please consider this my resignation. And he said, oh, okay. And I hung up my phone, Liz. And then I looked at Rocky and I said, Rocky, I just quit the legal profession. And she said, well, Mark, look around. Where are you? I'm looking around. I said, well, Harvard. And she goes, and what are you doing in an hour? I said, well, giving a lecture on the afterlife and autographing copies of my new book, Never Letting Go. And she said, don't you think you're exactly where you're supposed to be? And that is how I left the legal profession.
It sounds very like everything came
fell
together.
Into place. Yeah.
All fell into place. Yeah, which sometimes can be a struggle then. When you're on the right path, it does seem to be like, all that sort of constant struggle seems to go away in a certain way. I have a question. So being a lawyer and thinking like a lawyer and trained like a lawyer, does that impact how you process your evidence and information coming in as a medium?
That's a very interesting question because I've always had a very analytical mind. And my parents told me that around 14 months, I went from mama and dada to complete sentences in 2 weeks. And then dad said, then came the questions. And then they said they realized they couldn't talk baby talk around me because I understood it. So I've always been able to put things together very, very quickly. And I thank God for this gift. So I look at my background in law as emphasizing the importance of evidence. And that's why I'm an evidential medium, because both careers rely on evidence. I mean, lawyers have to have evidence to prove and substantiate a case. You know that. You worked on a law case recently. Evidence is the key. And as a medium, evidence is key as well, because I have to bring forth pieces of information transmitted to me by a spirit that nobody else could know to guarantee the authenticity of the contact. So I think in that respect, it's helped a lot. Also, being patient with people in very distressing situations. An attorney needs to keep a level head at all times, because if you lose your cool, you can lose a case. And when dealing with people that are in a profound state of grief, which is why most people come to mediums, you have to be patient and realize that they're not always thinking clearly, because they're so overwhelmed with grief. So there are a lot of skills that I acquired during the practice of law that have been transferable into my work as a medium. That, and also the research. For anyone that reads my books, you can see the research that I do. I want to make sure that if I state a scientific theory or fact, that it is substantiated by legitimate sources. Everyone goes around going, oh, quantum this and energy that. And it's like, yeah, that's nice. But let's use the terms properly, and let's make sure, and I want to make sure that they're accurate.
Yeah. And as most listeners know, really my whole background coming to this, well, grief, but the first thing I went to was science and physics, and all you mentioned so many of the researchers, Sir Roger Penrose, Dr. Stuart Hameroff, all the ones that really impacted me. And One thing I say, even though I am not a lawyer, I've always kind of thought maybe a little legalistically, I always say I think there's a preponderance of evidence of an afterlife at this point. How are you with that? I haven't quite made it to, I guess, what's required in a criminal versus civil, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. But I am at a preponderance of evidence. So where are you at with that?
Oh, I'm way past beyond a reasonable doubt. So there is no doubt. I'm a medium. I've done readings for over 15,000 people. And I was trying to estimate the number of spirits I've interacted with has got to be at least 200 plus thousand in my life. I did a reading yesterday where 10 people came through for the client. And it was interesting because the first one that came through, I described him, and she said, "Oh, that was my second husband, and he died." And I said, and I said, "Well, he wants you to know he's there with Bobby." And she burst into tears, and she said Bobby was his mentally disabled brother who died. And Bobby came through and said, "Well, I'm not disabled anymore." And that was just the tip of the evidential iceberg, and particularly when you get, something that clear. Bobby's here with me, and he had a brother they called Bobby, that was mentally had severe brain damage. And I work with spirits all the time. So for me, it's a fact of life. Now, in the past couple years, there have been significant advances in afterlife research. 2022 was a real banner year because in Tartu, Estonia, and I can always remember this because it happened on February 2nd, 2022, 2/2/22, or no, February 22nd, 2/22/22. In Tartu, Estonia, an 87-year-old man went into epileptic seizures, and he was rushed to the hospital. And the standard protocol is to administer an EEG, an electroencephalogram, to measure brainwave function. Well, while they were doing this, he had a massive heart attack and died. Now, there had never been anyone who died while being administered an EEG before. And what happened in his brain, or with his brainwave frequencies, rocked the scientific world. All 5 of his brainwave frequencies, gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta, surged and went off the scale. And scientists didn't think that would be the case. They figured they would taper off. And so one scientist said, well, it's possible he could be replaying events of a life review that people describe in near-death experiences. Well, then later that year came the lucid dying study, and almost over 500 people in over 25 hospitals in the United States and in Great Britain, um, while people were going into cardiac arrest and while they're being administered CPR, they were given EEGs. And 1 in 5 survivors came out of the experience describing a near-death experience where your consciousness leaves your body and you're aware of what happens in return. And the conclusion of the study is it appears that consciousness survives physical death. So now we're getting empirical data, scientific evidence that when you physically die, your body may die, but your consciousness, which is what we call the spirit or the soul in realms in the scientific realm and in the psychological realm, and what I refer to as the electromagnetic soul, the EMS, survives your physical death. So we are getting there. We're getting there, Liz. We're getting really, really close.
Now, do you know why they concluded from that, the intense brain activity and all that? What made them conclude that did show survival of consciousness?
Because the thought was, as your body is dying, your energy's weakening. So instead, the brainwave frequencies be getting lower, slower, fizzle out instead of spiking. Now, I've got a theory on this, which you read in the Afterlife frequency. There is a phenomenon referred to as terminal lucidity. And terminal lucidity occurs, people that are on the verge of death. They could be brain damaged, could be Alzheimer's, could be brain tumors, could be oxygen deprivation. Basically, their brain is not working at all. Okay, and then just before death, they regain consciousness and coherence. They start talking to the people around them. They may mention the people in spirit that are coming to visit, and then they die. And this has confounded neuroscientists. Neuroscience is the field of science that studies the human brain. And even the Newtonian reductionist, materialist, atheist scientists in the realm of neuroscience agree that prior to death, your brain doesn't grow 1 billion new neurons, brain cells. So my theory is that when you look at an incandescent light bulb, just before it burns out, there's a flash of light. Now, why is that? It's because in the filament, there is, the filament is made of tungsten. Tungsten is a metal, and that helps regulate the electrical flow through the light bulb. And as the filament wears out, it is no longer able to handle that amount of electricity, so there is a flash of energy. Our brain has an electrical field. The wires in it are neurons, okay, and neurosynapses. And so we have an electrical field in our brain. And so when your brain is healthy, it's capable of regulating the amount of electricity that flows through it. The brain is only 2% of the body's weight, but it consumes over 20% of the body's electrical energy. By analogy, as the brain is no longer able to handle that amount of electrical activity, there's a surge. And that surge is your soul, your consciousness, which I refer to as the EMS, the electromagnetic soul. And I can explain what that is in a moment. And so for a few moments, there's this surge of energy, which enables a person to regain consciousness, say coherent things, recognize people, and communicate with them, and then they pass. And we've even seen this in animals as well. My manager, Rocky, she had this beloved cat that she took care of, and he had a deformed leg, and she took care of him, and he was comatose, and he was dying, and she was holding him. And all of a sudden, he opened up his eyes, took his paw, touched her cheek, and then died. So we're seeing that terminal lucidity appears to violate all the laws and the studies of neuroscience. Scientists, that study the brain, the theory is that consciousness, the who and what we are, is created by chemical reactions and electrical impulses in the brain, but they're completely at a loss to explain why. If you get a neuroscience book, it may be 600 pages long, and the vast bulk of it will discuss brain functions, and there may be a paragraph about consciousness because they don't understand how it's formed. And so those of us who study this believe that the brain is merely the computer hard drive, okay? It hosts the soul, the consciousness. It does not create it. It's like your computer hard drive did not create the operating system on it, didn't create Windows, all right? Didn't create the data. And so when that computer hard drive crashes, if you're set up properly, it'll go to Dropbox. I always joke, it goes to Dropbox if you're Christian and Microsoft Cloud if you're not, but all joking aside, by analogy, I think that's how we should be looking at this.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I think there's a misconception, at least there was with me and probably a lot of people, that it was a fact and they understood how consciousness was created by a brain. And yeah, it's just as much a mystery. They have no explanation for that, although they're claiming it's a fact. And that was a game changer for me when I realized that. It really helped my grief. And you wrote about a lot of the physics theories that I just love. And one I really hadn't known much about and was fascinated by, I would love to explain it, is the quantum lattice theory. Am I pronouncing that right?
The quantum lattice theory, Schwarzschild's quantum lattice theory. Carl Schwarzschild was a friend and associate of Albert Einstein. I'll tell you, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, there was a renaissance when it came to brain trust. You had Carl Schwarzschild, you had Albert Einstein, you had Oppenheimer, Niels Bohr, Max Planck, Werner Heisenberg, Louis de Broglie. I mean, my Lord, there was this. And Albert Einstein's wife, Mileva, I believe her name was Mileva Marovich, but Mileva Einstein gets overlooked all the time. Ladies, you were there right at the beginning because Mileva Einstein worked very closely with her husband Albert as he developed the general theory of relativity. So women have been as much a part of this as the men, the male scientists. And the Schwarzschild quantum lattice theory, he believed that electrons, everything's made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons. Protons and neutrons are at the center of an atom, and an electron orbits it, that electrons will disappear from one location and reappear in another without going through the matter in between. Scientists in the past 20 years have actually done this in laboratories. So an electron's disappearing, then reappearing in another location without going through the matter in between. And so the theory is that the electron is quantum leaping, going through like a mini version of a black hole to another dimension and then returning to our dimension. And so by analogy, that's what happens when we die. Our soul leaves our body and quantum leaps to what I call the afterlife frequency, to another dimension. And that's why spirit communication, spirits come through so quickly, because heaven, the afterlife, nirvana, whatever you want to call the other side, isn't some distant place orbiting a nebula million light years away. It's a parallel dimension. Think of it this way. Think of our world, Liz, as AM radio. We have energy, we have frequency, we have vibration. And then the other side is FM radio, a completely different energetic system, but they coexist and coincide. And sometimes AM and FM overlap. In one of my lectures, I refer to this as the NDE zone, the near-death experience zone, because they will overlap. In other words, a spirit will quantum leap from the other side, the afterlife frequency, into our dimension to communicate. So the quantum lattice theory, I believe, is a building block for our ability to explain and henceforth understand spirit communication and the afterlife.
If you want to learn how I went from being a skeptical atheist who thought there was zero chance of an afterlife to a skeptical atheist who thinks an afterlife is highly probable, come check out my books. WTF Just Happened. And do you also think that there's multiple different dimensions and states of consciousness? Or do you think it's this material dimension and the other side, which is, whatever dimension that would be?
Based on string theory, there's more than one universe. There's more than one dimension. There's more than one universe, and within universes, there are dimensions. And I've heard all sorts. There's only 3, there's 7, there's 11. I don't know how we can quantify something like that. Recently, I saw a scientist talking about the Webb Space Telescope. Now, the Webb Telescope's really fantastic. All right, you're aware of it. And he said there was a picture that the telescope took, and there was a 1 square inch part of the photograph, and they enlarged it, and it's filled with all these spirals and colorful. He goes, those are all galaxies. Okay, he said this is a tiny, tiny glimpse of galaxies. Now, for people, please forgive me if you already know this. Earth is in a solar system. There's the sun and the 9 planets, or 8 if you want to cast Pluto out as a planetoid as opposed to a planet. And a galaxy is a collection of solar systems which appear to orbit a central point within a galaxy. All right, so a galaxy is its own system, and then there are other galaxies which do the same thing. Within that small, like 1 by 1 part of a photograph, there were something like 100,000 galaxies. Now, if you take a 360-degree view of that, there are trillions, possibly quadrillions, maybe more galaxies. Our Milky Way galaxy, it is believed, has 400 trillion stars in it. And now these deep space telescopes, it appears that it's very natural for a star to have things orbiting it, things meaning planets. So even if only 0.000000001% of those has life on it, we're still talking billions of planets. So we really live in exciting times, but it's frustrating too, because I want to know. I want to know, but maybe part of what we're supposed to be doing here is focusing on what we're doing here and not worrying so much about that. I mean, it's okay to want to learn about it, because that's the nature of our soul. Our mind is to explore and to discover. But while we're here, we have to love. We have to show compassion. We have to savor every moment in this world. There's a reason why we're here. And I've always believed, Liz, that every day we're alive is a gift, although many days it does not feel that way. And you could look at people in a severely impaired physical or mental state and think, how could life possibly be a gift for them? People living in war zones that are being blasted to pieces, and the civilians caught in the crossfire. How is life a gift for them? But spirits tell me that once you leave your material body and you quantum leap to the other side, you realize that our physical existence is but a minute fraction, a drop of water in this vast eternal sea that is our existence, that is our life.
Right. It's I just get chills when I even think about that, the quantity of then the vastness of outer space and all of it.
It's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I always think of when I think of the Webb telescope, I mean, we're essentially looking back in time when we look at other planets.
We are.
What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on time in general? Do you have any theories? I just thought I'd throw an easy one right in there,
Let's talk about mediumship and time. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, everything's made of molecules, which are made of atoms, which are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which are made at the smallest level of a quantum, which is pure electromagnetic energy. And everything, that means you, me, the air we're breathing, the microphones we're speaking into, the radio waves that this program is being broadcast on, the light of the sun, the rings of Saturn, and beyond are all made at the subatomic level of the same particle, electromagnetic energy, which is a quantum. And I developed the term the electromagnetic soul to describe what we really are, which is pure consciousness that is eternal electromagnetic energy. It's the law of thermodynamics and physics. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. So, if there is no time, and that's hard to wrap your head around. Well, I was doing a reading for this woman, and her mother's spirit came through, and the mother started talking to me about a boy in this world, about a 7-year-old boy who was having problems with his eyes. And my client said, well, I don't have any children, but I'm very close to my 7-year-old nephew, my sister's son, and he has been complaining of headaches a lot lately. I said, well, your mother said, get him to the eye doctor, and now she's giving me this song, Tutti Frutti All Rudy by Little Richard. She goes, what? I go, I know that sounds weird, and I've been doing this long enough to know how weird it is. Go ahead and say it. She goes, well, I know who Little Richard is, and I know the song, but it doesn't have any significance for me. I said, don't worry about it. Just make a note of it. So Liz, a couple weeks later, she contacts me, and she said, Mark, you're not going to believe this. And I love it when I hear that because, she said, I called my sister and said, this psychic said, Mom's spirit said, take your boy to the eye doctor. And she goes, I think we need to because his headaches are getting worse. So my client, her sister, and the little boy, they go to the eye doctor, and 2 weeks later, and the second they walked into the eye doctor's office, on their radio, it started playing Tutti Frutti, Ah Rudy by Little Richard.
So
now,
weird.
Yes, very weird, but also scientifically explainable and through time. On the quantum level, and our souls are a pure electromagnetic energy. I mean, there's love and who we are in there, but there is an explanation for it. It's EM energy. And on the quantum level, there is no time, so spirits can perceive what we call the future. Well, guess what? Radio waves are also part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So the mom's spirit was saying, get my grandson to the eye doctor, and to let you know you're doing the right thing, I'm going to give you the song that's playing the second you walk into the doctor's office in what you call 2 weeks from now. And so because the mother's spirit could see the future event, she gave a verifiable piece of evidence to guarantee that, yes, this is what we're supposed to be doing. So I hope that answers your question about what I think about time.
Yes, as much as that question is answerable, yes. And, you've talked a little bit about the electromagnetic soul, and I think a concern I know sometimes it can sound like once we're not in a body that there's no longer individuality in that dimension. And that's something I worry about. People are like, well, we're all one. I'm like, okay, if that's trying to sound beautiful and spiritual, that sounds horrible to me. I don't want my dad to be one. I don't want to be one day.
Well, God's gift to us. And when I say God, I don't mean a neurotic white man sitting on a throne with a scepter smiting people who don't tithe 10%. Okay. I'm
Okay.
talking about a divine intelligence that flows within us, without us, through us, and all around us. And to say that we're all one, think of your soul, the electromagnetic soul, as a drop of water. And when we leave our body, that drop of water plunges into this eternal sea of souls. However, you maintain your individuality because your EMS, electromagnetic soul, is a coherent quantum field. So you're still Liz, but now, Liz, you are energetically interfacing with and linked with other souls that are linked to other souls that are linked to other souls that are linked to other souls. Ergo, we're all one, but we're still individuals. Let's think about the cells in your body. You have individual cells, but they're all part of a greater whole. So don't worry about losing your individuality. I mean, I communicate with spirits all the time. I mean, I communicate sometimes with spirits that died several decades ago, even longer, and they're very much who they are or were.
That is very relieving. I know it's something that has scared me, and I know some of our listeners have been bothered by that too. And now, one thing I absolutely adored about your book, and it matched so much how my mind works: science, physicists, research. Is there one researcher of this afterlife world whose research you're really excited about, that you'd want to talk about the most? I mean, I know all are amazing, but there's
Yeah,
one you want
there
to
are
share?
so many, but I have a particular affinity for Dr. Gary Schwartz. Dr. Gary Schwartz is clearly a genius. And if you ever, he's like the Albert Einstein of Afterlife. He's written so many books. He is just such an interesting man, and he's currently working on the Soul Phone project. And the Soul Phone is technology to communicate with spirits. I'm one of the research mediums on the Soul Phone project, and I've been in his laboratory. I've seen the data. I've seen the Soul Phone, and I'm not allowed to talk about it because I had to sign an NDA, non-disclosure
Oh
agreement. I know,
no,
I
no!
know,
I have so
but
many questions. I've like heard of it, but I know so little about it. I
well,
guess that's why.
you know what? I would recommend contacting his colleague, Dr. Mark Pitstick, because Mark Pitstick it kind of does the public relations, and he's the. I mean, you can interview Dr. Schwartz, but Dr. Pitstick will be happy to come on your show and discuss the Soul Phone project, and at least what can be divulged. But the technology is being developed, and think how revolutionary this is going to be. Because if you could turn on a device and tune into the other side, and all of a sudden there's your great Aunt Martha and your parents and your dog Fluffy, and I mean it's mind-boggling to think. I mean, Thomas Edison believed that this was possible. He called his project the Spirit Phone, and he was working on that in the 1920s, and he believed that he could create a device sensitive enough to detect and communicate with spirits. Now, as a paranormal investigator, that's another aspect of what I do. I've worked with equipment where spirits' voices come through it. And it's really cool when I'm also communicating with the spirit that's also coming through the electronic device. So the thing is, none of this is hocus pocus or magic. And I know the religious people, mediums are not God and blah, 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 blah. It's like, read the first book of Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 4 through 12. It gives a list of the gifts God gives to all of us, two of which are prophecy, foreseeing the future, and discernment of spirits, which is what a medium does. We're communicating, discerning with spirits. And it says that all these gifts come from God. So a lot of people, because they're afraid of death and afraid of spirit communication, they want to portray it in a negative light when it really isn't. And through the discovery and the evolution of quantum physics, I believe we're on the verge of I more than believe it. I know that we're on the verge of tremendous discoveries in the field of survival of consciousness and afterlife science.
Oh, wow. And I want to ask you so many questions about the cell phone, but I'll reach out to the gentleman you suggested. So
Yeah.
um, now, so you do paranormal investigations, medium readings. What do you have? Maybe one story from a medium reading, if you're allowed to share, and one from a paranormal investigation that I refer to as the what the fucks, just like the super evidential, inexplicable by normal means stories.
Well, I just gave one about Tutti Frutti All Rudy.
Yeah,
Okay, I mean
yeah.
that one's
Okay,
that
so
one's pretty
that's it.
cool.
That's great. Yeah, we could.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
and the reason I use that example because it's not only mediumship, but it incorporates seeing a future event, which ties into the general theory of relativity that Einstein put forth about how time does not exist as we know it. Um, Spirit communication or paranormal investigation. Recently, I was on a Discovery Channel show called Destinations of the Damned with Zach Bagans. The episode was entitled Fortress of Evil. And I was called in because of my gifts as a psychic medium and also my background in criminal law as a prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. And it took place at the Indiana State Sanatorium, which has been abandoned. It was built in 1907 to combat tuberculosis. And my God, was it a house of horrors where people were subjected to these ineffective and brutal treatments. They used to put weights on the chests of people with tuberculosis to calm their lungs. I mean, that is just torture by today's standards. And thank goodness antibiotics in the 1940s cleared that up. So then it was rechristened the Indiana Psychiatric Institute, and it became a mental institution, and the horrific abuse of patients continued. Then in 2009, there was a bizarre murder suicide where two of the employees, one was asked to work on a pump, and supposedly the other got jealous of him and went and shot him to death, and then went and blew his brains out in a nearby building. And so they brought me in, and I used the two different psychic skills: mediumship, which is direct communication with spirits, and psychometry, which is where where I tune into the energy of a person, place, or thing, because matter retains vibration. So that's why, in certain places you pick up on a traumatic event because that's a heavier, denser vibration. Also, Gary Galka was brought in. He's the inventor of the Spirit Box, which is technology to hear the voices of spirits. And so doing this, what was revealed to me was shocking, stunning. And if you want to find out what happens, you're going to have to see this episode. It's streaming on Disney Plus, Hulu, and Max, because out of respect and contractual obligation, I can't let the proverbial black cat out of the bag.
Well, I know what I'm doing this evening now. Oh, I'm so curious. Okay. Well, that's a good motivation. And now, as a lawyer, have you ever had any, criminals you defended or anyone you cross-examined who's come back to talk to you after they've passed? Or any signs from them?
Let me think about this.
Yeah,
actually, unless one of their family members comes to me and wants to communicate with them, because there's a misunderstanding with psychic ability. It's like when somebody famous dies, people call me and goes, well, has he contacted you yet? So, well, why would he or she? I have to have a direct contact. But I did have an interesting reading. I was doing a reading for this woman, and her grandfather came through. And all of a sudden, there was another spirit that came in next to him. And I said, this is going to sound strange, but the guy standing next to him looks just like Walt Disney. And she said, well, that isn't that weird because my grandfather was an animator and he worked with Walt Disney back in the 1920s. And I'm like, oh, cool. We got Walt Disney here. And indeed we did.
Oh, fun. That's
And
such a fun one.
it was really cool. And in but there was a lot more to it because then the grandmother came through and she said, oh, I wish you hadn't listened to me because she said, oh, you're never going to make any money drawing these cartoons. And the thing is, Walt Disney pleaded with this gentleman to stay and be part of his animation studio and even offered him part of the company, like 5%. Can you imagine what 5% of the Walt Disney Company would be worth in 2025? And so it was like I realized this was more than just Walt Disney popping up. This was a major thing that went down in this family. And I don't mean to laugh, but and my client said, yeah, she said, everybody in the family's pissed at grandma, so, but on the other hand, and as a spiritual teacher, I do feel compelled to say this. A lot of people equate money with happiness, and certainly, money doesn't buy happiness. It does make misery easier to endure, but you also don't know if he had done that, it could have opened the doors to wonderful opportunities, or it could have also opened the doors to tragedy as well. And history is filled with very wealthy people who had absolutely tragic lives. So we have to trust that there is a bigger scheme of things and that perhaps things really do work out the way they're supposed to, even though sometimes it's hard to feel that they are.
Yeah, so when you're in the heart of it, it's sometimes very hard. And I guess when we hit the other side, we'll be like, oh, that's what that horrible, week was about. And now in your book, you mention you had a near-death experience. I don't go into it too much because it was really a remarkable story. But is there anything about that you would like to share?
Well, my book that we've been referring to is The Afterlife Frequency. I've written 3 books, Never Letting Go, which is a guide on the journey through grief. And when I was on the Never Letting Go tour, people began to ask me questions like, is there a God? Do animals have souls? What happens if you die by suicide? Is there any scientific way to prove this? And so I wrote Evidence of Eternity, which incorporated a lot of science and to explain that. And that was so well received that led to me writing The Afterlife Frequency. And The Afterlife Frequency, the subtitle is The Scientific Proof of Spiritual Contact and How That Awareness Will Change Your Life. And for me, there's no doubt that there's an afterlife. When I started seeing spirits when I was about 3.5. And then just when I was 4, my family was living in Orlando. My dad was working for an aerospace contractor. That's why I've always been fascinated in science. My dad was, in aerospace. Most of my friends are rocket scientists. I mean, I've just been around it my whole life. And if people believe the Earth is flat, it's like, seriously, please get more than a 3rd grade education. But I mean that. I mean this whole the fact that people in the 21st century think the world is flat is just idiotic. I've met Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. I had a lengthy discussion with John Glenn, Captain Mike Foreman, who piloted the space shuttle, Bill Nelson, who used to be the head of NASA. My dad worked with astronauts. My friends are rocket scientists. It is not a hoax, folks. Okay. So anyway, Dad had to be away a lot, and I was really sick with impetigo. It was a pandemic running through the area at the time, or an epidemic rather. And my mother had me in a bathtub trying to bring down my fever, and I went into cardiopulmonary failure. I was, and she she panicked and she scooped me up out of the bathtub and she ran outside and she was screaming, "Help me, my baby's dying." And meanwhile, she had my sister calling an ambulance, and my brother ran across the street because there was a fireman that lived there and he happened to be home. And so the firemen came over and started doing CPR on me, and they got me breathing again. And the ambulance arrives. They get me in the ambulance, and my mother jumps in with them, and they put the oxygen mask on me to get oxygen into me. And the ambulance door closed on the oxygen hose, cut off my air supply, and I went into cardiac arrest and I died. And the next thing I knew, I flew out of the roof of the ambulance. I saw it going down Orange Blossom Trail, which back then actually had orange blossom trees and oranges on it. And I noticed there was numbers on the top of the ambulance. And then I went into this light. And if you want to find out what happens, you're going to have to get my book, The Afterlife Frequency. And it has been endorsed by the world's top afterlife researchers, near-death experience scientists. It's very humbling to see my book endorsed and embraced by the scientific community. And I'm going to be speaking as a keynote speaker at the 50th anniversary of the International Association for Near-Death Studies Conference in Chicago over Labor Day weekend at the end of August. We're very honored that Dr. Raymond Moody will be there. Dr. Raymond Moody is the scientist, the researcher who developed the term near-death experience. He was a child prodigy, boy genius, started hearing about these and began to study it. And because for thousands of years, people have been reporting incidents of someone who died and then returned to life. In other words, they died and lived to tell about it, like I did. And these resurrections, people died and they resurrected from the dead, had these incredible tales of traveling through a light or on a path and encountering deceased loved ones, the divine power that we call God, returning with enhanced psychic abilities, with a sense of interconnectedness, a love and a peace and a joy about them, believing that time has no meaning, the timelessness of time. And that's going to be the focus of my talk, which is entitled Near-Death Experiences, the Ancient Mystery That Changed the World. So if you're able to attend the International Association for Near-Death Studies 50th Anniversary Conference in Chicago, I believe you can also attend it online if you can't be there in person. Also, if I may, Liz, on June 7th and 8th, coming up, is the Spiritual Awakenings International Online Conference. 40 speakers from 12 countries. I'm honored to be one of the keynotes. And my talk is going to be on Sunday, June 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern U.S. And my talk is entitled Reincarnation. The subtitle is Deja Vu, Who Were You? And this is going to be a really amazing event, and it is free. But you do have to register, and you're welcome to make donations because SAI, Spiritual Awakenings International, is a great organization.
So while this event that Mark is talking about has passed, please do check out their website for future events, opportunities to support. They're a really wonderful organization.
And I'm very honored to be a speaker there as well. So Liz, I want to thank you so much for having me as your guest. And I especially want to thank all of your listeners for tuning in. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now, lastly, where can our listeners find you, follow you?
I invite everyone to visit my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, just like my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency. I invite you to sign up for my newsletter. And if you go to the calendar of events, you can see what I have coming up. I also write for Best Holistic Life magazine. And every month I have an article in there. It's a wonderful magazine. You can find out about my books, booking private readings, my online light circles, limited to 6 people, so everybody gets a session.
This is a rerun of my episode with psychic medium Mark Anthony. He is doing an event with the Omega Institute that I am so excited about. If you haven't listened to this episode yet, listen and learn a bit more about him. This event is called the NDE Zone. What's the NDE Zone? Okay, so I know you all love learning about afterlife evidence, near-death experiences, and mediumship as much as I do. So I want to share this event I'm attending, the NDE Zone, connected by the light from the cosmic to the subatomic, being taught by Mark Anthony, who's a 4th-generation evidential psychic medium. This event will be hosted by one of my favorite places, the Omega Institute, where transformation becomes real. It's virtual, so it will be affordable and easy to attend. Mark describes the NDE Zone as the interface between our material world dimension and the other side dimension. Also, Mark's an attorney, so he loves evidence, explains these topics in a very relatable and non-woo way. Plus, he's really funny. In this 2-hour event, Mark will take you on an entertaining and educational journey from the cosmic to the subatomic to explain our present understanding of the NDE zone through quantum physics. So, very science-y. And then we will conclude by looking toward future discoveries yet to be revealed. I'll be there. I go to as many Omega events as I can, so please come, and afterwards you can tell me what you thought about it. It will be January 28th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can sign up on eomega.org, and while you're there, be sure to check out their other incredible transformative events. That's eomega.org.